Yes. All right. If either Carly or Nick or someone on the back end can give me the sign of when we think we're at a decent number of registrants who've shown up, let me know so I can go ahead and kick this party off. Okay.
I think we're probably good to get started, Sean, and people will continue to trickle in.
Okay. Okay. Good deal. You guys are admitting people as they come in?
Yeah, Svante will admit them and mute them.
Okay, very good. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started here. First and foremost, welcome everyone to the IJRU Diversity and Inclusion Panel. My name is Sean Hamilton, the president of IJRU, and I'm excited that you are here today. I want to thank you all so very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. Also, I hope and pray that every one of you all are staying safe and healthy during these interesting times. Electronic meeting will be a part of our futures going forward quite a bit. So we're grateful that we can take advantage of this technology while we can. So I want to thank you all for those taking time to join us. I also like to thank a lot of the folks who are behind the scenes making this happen and very special. Mr. Nick Woodard, Carly Simpson, Svante, Andre Kasalika, Erica Zen. Thank you all so very much for your great work in making this panel a reality. To all of our IJRU board members, I welcome you and thank you for your continued leadership in this space. To all of our NGB presidents, we thank you so very much for your commitment to IJRU. And of course, to all of our athletes who make our sport work and possible, we thank you. In fact, it is you athletes is what make our work even special, even worthwhile. Today, this conversation is about diversity and inclusion. Now, for many people, that's a knee-jerk reaction because many folks, it jars a lot of emotion or feelings. Please know that today's conversation is about inclusion. It's about how can we, as a sport, be more inclusive to those who might even feel or perceive that they are not always included. I will say that inclusion is a vital, if not essential, part of any organization, whether it be in sport or business or travel, whatever it is vital. Any institution that is not actively looking at, have a clear plan, or cognizant of diversity and inclusion efforts will find themselves in a position to where growth and expansion is very, very difficult. IJRU needs to be thinking forward and always looking at who we can include, because our sport, in my humble estimation, is a tremendous and one of the best sports to be inclusive. As a former athlete, has been a part of this sport for 30 years, former U.S. national and a world champion, I have my own experiences of seeing and feeling not always included. Let me tell you all a brief story, and I'll explain to you what we mean by inclusion, not feeling always a part of the pack, or even when race, ethnicities come into play. I was in a particular country when I was an athlete. I was about 16 years old. And we were jumping in a bunch of places, doing a lot of demonstrations. After one of the shows, as most athletes know, you jump hard, you get sweaty, and you're panting, and there's the after show, and people come by, and you sign autographs at times, and you do a lot of these things that we as jumper athletes often do when we're touring. Well, afterwards, a young lady walked up to me, and she touched my hand, my arm, And she looked at it and said, "It doesn't rub off." And in that moment, my entire trip at that time, I felt no longer part of the group. I felt outside of the group. It really made me feel not welcome or part of. And there are many silent stories, such as mine, that impact involvement in the sport. I, for one, am an extremely blessed and fortunate individual, as I've been afforded many opportunities that many people often don't get afforded, to where I find myself today. So I would encourage those, although you may see me and say, "Well, Sean, you made these steps and you've achieved these accomplishments." Please don't look at these alone as if this is how it is. Well, it's often not. There are many barriers that are in place. I've been so fortunate enough that those barriers were either eradicated for me personally, or I was able to do something quite different that others were not. But nonetheless, that is a very small example of where we find ourselves in this sport. And it's not just US, it's global. There are many things that happen globally in which people do not feel always included as part of our sport. And I will say it's not just about race. It is more than that. It is also about gender equality. And it's also about being able-bodied, cognitive disabilities. There are many opportunities our sport has to be inclusive. Today's conversation is an opportunity to explore what those things are barriers, but also say, well, how can we move towards solution as well? That's the essence of our conversation here on today. I am happy to announce, thanks to the action of our board of directors, that that IJRU will be participating in the One Humanity Project. The One Humanity Project is a collaboration between the Global Association of International Sports Federations, also known as GASE, and the United Nations. And the United Nations is calling on sport to be a vehicle and advocate for cohesiveness to promote one humanity. IJRU was an early adopter. GASE actually sought out IJRU as a partner in this space, and I'm so proud that IJRU stepped up quickly and accepted the call to be a participant within that. As a result, IJRU will be broadcasting and pushing out content that talks about how our sport can serve as a vehicle for one humanity. So I'm extremely proud of that effort and how we'll go forward. There's going to be a lot of great conversation here today. We do encourage people to participate via the chat. Let us know that you are here. We'd love to hear your thoughts and comments and questions as well. I will say that please be mindful that IJRU, we do not tolerate abusive language. We do not tolerate bullying, nor do we tolerate language that may seem offensive and harmful. So be mindful of comments that are made in the chat. We know that many of you don't have that in your spirit, but we certainly want to make sure people understand that where IJRU stands when it comes to that. Last thing I'll say is this, and I'll turn over to our illustrious panel and moderator. If you've ever gone to the IJRU website, the very first thing you see are our core values. They've been on there since the day we started. I'm so proud of IJRU for already having the foresight to say, here are our core values. And in times of crises and in times of issues, when they arise, you lean on your core values. You understand who you are. I'm so proud of our organization and our sport that when the pandemic struck, or when we find ourselves in civil unrest, the first thing we did was, let's look at our core values. How do we uphold these things first and foremost? I'm so proud of our organization that we've done that. And you should be proud, this community, that you have an organization that's the first thing we think of. It's not about who's going to win a championship. It's not about who's going to host. It's about upholding our core values. So again, I want to thank you all for that. And I am excited for you all to take part in this discussion and open ourselves to hear the expression and stories of others that will help us become more inclusive to all those who would like to participate. And I'll say this, that it is a part of our growth strategy. These are not just words on the paper. Without this, we don't grow. So again, thank you so very much for listening to me. I now have the distinct privilege of turning this over to a great individual. His name is Mr. Adrian Taylor. Mr. Adrian Taylor is the System Director for Diversity and Inclusion for Premier Health Partners, which is the largest healthcare system in Southwest Ohio. Adrian Taylor has decades of experience of diversity and inclusion work, from supply diversity to human resources as well. His knowledge and expertise of moderating panels extends throughout the U.S. and now throughout the world. He is a great individual, a kind and generous person, and we are in the hands of a tremendous diversity and inclusion expert. So at this time, it is my privilege to turn this panel over to Mr. Adrian Taylor, Director of Inclusion for Premier Health Partners. Mr. Adrian Taylor.
Wow. Thank you, Sean, for that amazing introduction. I was wondering who you were talking about until you said my name. So thank you for that. Sean loves this organization. Since I've known him, and I've known Sean for years, I would venture to say nearly a decade, he's talked about this organization and his heart for it. So thank you, Sean, for inviting me into a conversation with your family to curate this conversation. And I've already met some of these folks from around the world, and their passion is the same. I want to re-echo what Sean has said. This is going to be a conversation that may be uncomfortable for some that to hear it, but in order to grow, as Sean has already indicated, as he painted the picture of one humanity and this organization's working alongside of those other organizations, it's important to have this upfront dialogue, to be transparent as much as possible, while yet holding back some of the colorful language that goes along with it. But in order for us to move forward successfully as a group, as an international organization that others are calling on to partner with, which is really, quite honestly, a huge responsibility and privilege, people see this group as a platform for the greater good of humanity across the world. That is huge. So let's have a candid conversation. Let's talk about it. Let's use the chat, and let's grow together as we have this dialogue and conversation together as an organization. And again, it's a privilege to be here. And Sean, thank you for having me. I want our panelists. I'm not technically savvy in this moment in understanding how this works, but I'm hoping that everybody can see everybody. I want the panelists to introduce themselves. I've already met them. They have already been a blessing to me. And I'll ask that they would say two things: say their names and what country they represent. And a third thing: name, country, and how many years that you have been involved with this sport. I'd like to start off with Keo.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Keo Mokolopo. I am from South Africa, and I've been with the sport of jump rope for about 16, 17 years now. I started in 2003-4.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Janice? You're on mute, Janice.
Hi, my name is Janice Harrington, and I live in Connecticut in the United States. I'm a physical education teacher for over 30-some years, and I've been coaching for over 35 years.
Thank you, Janice. Kim?
Hi, my name is Kim Bradshaw. I'm from the United States. I've been in the sport for 40 years, 30 years coaching, and as a jumper for most of those years.
Thank you, Kim. Carly?
Hi, everyone. My name is Carly Simpson. I'm from Ontario, Canada, and I've been involved as an athlete, coach, and I guess administrator for about 25 years now.
Awesome. Thank you, Carly. TK? And by the way, guys, today is TK's birthday, so give him some chat love, please. TK?
Thank you. I'm TK. Well, my name is Takashi Ogawa. I'm the Executive Vice President of IJRU. I've been involved in the sport for maybe 25 years, and you might have known me as the part of FISAC IRSF, which I started being involved in there 2014 or so. Yeah, so I 25 years, I lost my social life, and this is my last, one party in 6 months, and I'm here with you on my birthday. So I'm very proud to be here. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, TK. There should be another person joining us by the name of JoJo shortly. And if I'm not mistaken, JoJo's been doing this for a number of years as well. Sean, probably the better part of 15, 20 years. So collectively, this group has nearly 150 years worth of experience in this sport. That's nothing to shake a stick at. That's impressive, very impressive. So with that, I'm going to start and open up with a question for the different panelists, and let's just have you share with us. What does inclusion mean for you and the IJRU organization? What does inclusion, when I say the word inclusion, what does it mean for you in this organization? We could start with Carly.
Sure. I think inclusion is really about providing spaces, safe spaces where people feel comfortable existing. So we want to make sure that we're providing a space not just for our athletes, but our coaches, judges, anyone who is participating in the sport, spectators, to feel welcome. And I think that happens at both an individual level and also at an institutional level. So there's going to be individual relationships that develop, and we need to make sure that, whoever we're putting in the front line, welcoming and greeting these people, are able to do that in an inclusive way. And then we also want to make sure that our organizational structures exist in a way that we are providing space and providing policies and procedures that allow people to feel comfortable. So, anti-discrimination policies and practices are in place.
Thank you, Carly. That was good. I appreciate that. Kim, your thoughts on inclusion and what it means to this organization?
I would say feeling wanted, being seen, listened to, respected and valued, so that you can, be the best athlete you can, so that you can focus mainly on what your task is at hand, whether it's competing or being at a workshop, so that you're not worried about any other outside factors, but just being a great athlete.
I like that. Thank you, Kim. Keo, your thoughts about inclusion for this organization?
For me, when I hear the word inclusion, I really think of everything in one. In South Africa, we've got, I'm not sure whether the biscuits are all over, we've got choice assorted biscuits. And inside this pack of biscuits, you get all different shapes, you get all different sizes, you get all different colors, you get everything in one pack. So if I take it down to IJRU, that is what I want to see. I want to see different people. I want to see diversity. And some of the people have already spoken about feeling welcome as well as to join IJRU. For me, when you feel welcome, you also need to appreciate the fact that we are different people, and with appreciating that comes respect, and respecting those differences that we all bring into one organization. That's what it means for me.
So it sounds like you guys are saying that it's not just being welcomed, but it's being respected, celebrated. Let's celebrate the differences at IJRU. It's fantastic. Thank you, Keo. I don't want to be missing anybody here. TK, birthday man. When I say inclusion, how do you feel about that? What does that mean for the organization to you?
Right, to me, inclusion is more of the knowing that having the difference is actually the strength or the power in the organization. It is quite difficult to understand, explain, but I didn't actually mind any different opinions in the organization. But the biggest difference is, or biggest part is that if you share the core values with everyone, and if everyone actually believes in the core values within the organization, difference actually becomes a power. Does that make sense? I think I'll give you a good example. I think Sean and I are quite different. I think chalk and cheese. I am, beautiful. Sean's okay. Sean's good. And, we're sort of different. But, from the beginning, from the first day one, we said we're doing this for the athletes and for sport. And with that mantra, even we have different views or visions, that becomes a power. So I think that's the key of the inclusion.
I thought you and Sean were twins. I can't believe you said that. But I do appreciate you.
Only mothers can see the differences.
But I think you said something in a fantastic way, that difference should be a power. It seems like based globally on what we've seen since the death of George Floyd, that people are starting to get the ideal of the power behind difference and removing barriers, which we'll get to, so that we can utilize the power of difference. Even looking at the optic of looking at this call, there's so much difference here, and I'm so appreciative. But before we move into barriers, I want to hear from Jojo. He's on the call. Jojo, when I say inclusion, my friend, Jojo's coming to us from France.
Hello.
What does that look like to you for this organization?
For me, inclusion is to care about everyone, all the jumper, all the coaches, all the judges, and everyone have to be treated at the same level. No one under, no one on the top. Everybody together, working together.
Thank you, Jojo. Everyone caring for everyone. That sums it up. A couple of key things that I've heard here for those who like to take notes. Carly said safe spaces and being welcoming and putting policy and structures in place to ensure that takes place. Kim talked about feeling wanted, seen, respected, and valued. Keo referred to embracing all the differences, using the analogy of the biscuits and how there's different shapes and colors in it. And no matter what that looks like, it's all respected. TK talked about the power of difference, and JoJo talked about everybody being treated the same way. Those are imperative, I would say, for any organization, that we have to have that. Sean pointed out earlier that we have to have this conversation so that we can, a four-letter word, grow. And growth means a lot, especially in partnering with other organizations that sees what this organization is about. So I think by foundation, we have identified what inclusion looks like for this organization moving forward, for jumpers, for coaches, even for judges, and policies and procedures. But we're going to go through this conversation and dialogue and talk about barriers, because holistically, I think every organization, including IJRU, in addition to every major Fortune 100, 500 company across the world, they are taking this hard look at what barriers do we have in place that have been put in place, not deliberately, but what things do we need to unpack? What barriers and roadblocks do we need to remove so that we can move into this definition that we all collectively just described? So I'm going to go back around and ask our panelists, from your lens, from your country, what barriers do you see that would prevent IJRU from moving forward in an inclusive capacity? Does that make sense? I'm going to say it one more time. What barriers or roadblocks are things that are in the way that will prevent IJRU from moving forward in the spirit of inclusion in your country? Let's start with
From
Keo in Africa.
From my side, I'm from South Africa. I represent as well Africa as a continent at the IJRU board. And one of our barriers is, I would say, accessibility of the sport because of the location that we're in. And with that is funding. Right, it's fun to get to a place where you can get to do jump rope. It's fun to get to a competition venue where the championships are being held. It's fun to get to the world championships. When you see South Africa, you see a sport that is done by predominantly black people, and you ask yourself why, if South Africa is so diverse. We are a country with 11 official languages. And there is a lot of us. There's a lot of us, but you only see black. You can ask yourself, why is it that when you come to South Africa that this sport is only represented by a particular race? And that is what we need to change. The barrier is accessibility, it's funding. It's not only for South Africa, it's other African countries as well. I've been to a couple of them. They just as diverse, but when you get to the world champs, you see Africa, you see black. It's like you don't have white people, you don't have Asians, you don't have any other race in Africa but black. And we need to ask ourselves why. Why is it that? Why is it our sport is perceived in Africa as a black sport? And that is what we need to change.
Keo, thank you so very much for your transparency and sharing that. And that's something for us all to consider. And again, to Sean's point, use the chat. Let's hear from you. But that is definitely a barrier, because we know that jump roping is for all people. Even me in my old age, I can jump a little bit, but I have access because I'm in America. We need to think about how do we increase the access in South Africa. Thank you, Keo.
Sorry, I think you were muted.
Sorry,
there.
I'm sorry. So
yeah,
sorry.
I, like, I think I saw my name. Reading.
So, Carly,
did you ask me the same question, I assume?
Same question, sure did, for Canada.
Yeah, I think in Canada, we're going to struggle a lot with economic barriers in certain places. So, you know, we often think that jump rope is fairly inexpensive to participate in. All you need are shoes and a rope. But if you want to compete at a high level, you also need to be able to travel. And we right now don't have funding from our government organizations. And so that is placed onto the individual families involved in the sport. That's placed on our athletes and their families. And so this is a barrier. Our sport in Canada is really white. So the opposite of Keo, even though Canada is extremely multicultural. Toronto is one of the most diverse cities in North America, and we don't even have jump rope teams in the city of Toronto. Why is that? And that needs to change. I think there's some other barriers that could exist as well. So IJRU has a gender policy. I don't know that all of our national governing bodies do. So are trans kids able to participate in our sport when we divide based on gender? How does that look? And are we creating space for, you know, gender non-binary folks to access our sport and participate? And then just based on my own experiences as a woman in sport generally, so sport is pretty dominated by men in most high levels. We don't see female athletes represented on TV in major sports. They don't get TV contracts. And so I think that needs to change globally in other sports, but also ours as well. So there have been instances when, you know, people want to talk more about my appearance after I compete, or even just trying to, you know, gain a seat at the table. That becomes something that we're for some reason talking about. I get told to smile. I've been, you know, physically touched by people in our sport in inappropriate ways when I was young. So I think that there's lots of ways that women might not feel comfortable in our sport if we don't educate people around how to include them.
Right. Carly, that was tremendous, and thank you for your transparency and vulnerability. And I'm hearing us move down a place of, Sean, looking at some solutions to the barriers. I'm hearing policy from the national governing, and I'm also hearing education. Carly, I understand exactly what you're talking about when you talk about binary and gender equality, but I would, from my experience, people need to be educated on the fundamentals of that conversation before they can move in a progressive space to become welcoming and inviting. Thank you so very much for your share. Janice, would love to hear from you. What barriers are you seeing over in Connecticut that will prevent this sport from taking off where it really has the capacity to?
Well, I think it's very important that you establish a foundation and you start that from the ground up. So if you're a coach like I am, you have to start basic things and incorporate everybody within your own group as a basis. I coach a predominantly white team, and I try to reach out to other organizations to give them experience in those capacities. So I participate with USA Jump Rope, I participate with National Double Edge League, I participate with American Double Edge League. So these experiences help to break some of those barriers that you're talking about. And I do agree with Carly as far as the domination by men, and there should be more leadership within each organization so that you see more diversity within the organization in those leadership roles. But as far as barriers, I think the reaching out and expanding starts to break those barriers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Janice. Hearing that same thing you and Carly are saying about the men dominating. There needs to be a platform and a way to ensure that at the top, at the leadership level, that there's more diversity. Thank you so much for your share. Jojo, would love to hear from you, my friend, over in France. What barriers are you seeing over there, if any?
So for us, the barriers is not the same. I can say, as an inclusion, we have like all community together who jump together. So, oh, sorry. Now you can see me, I think. So the barriers, it's also about funding, because the family can't afford all the money for the competition and everything. In France, what is good is we have some help from the French government and the Ministry of Sport, so we can help our jumper to go in international competition, not the global fee, but we can help, like, if I remember, it's something like 30% of all the bill for all jumpers. But I would say the barriers for us, it's more to have like people to develop the sport. It's more about this in France, because of we have the right to develop this sport like all other sport in the Ministry of Sport. We have the benefit all the structure of different sports. So we don't have the same barriers like I said in US or in South Africa. But I will say funding is also a problem for us. I can hear you.
So sorry, it sounds like you're saying the same thing, funding. You could strengthen funding to break this barrier of inclusion in France. More funding.
Yes, also.
Yeah. Thank you, Jojo. I appreciate seeing your face, man. Kim, I see you over there. Tell me about your thoughts about barriers that are preventing IJRU from taking off to its full capacity.
Well, for the U.S., I think that we have some different barriers than, say, France or South Africa. I think because we've been in jump rope so long, historically, there are some ways and trends that the way things have been done that need to change, and I think there's some resistance to change. I think there's some implicit bias that people are bringing to the table, and I think there's a lack of knowledge of different cultures and values. You know, people are not valuing the diversity. Yeah, I think those are some of the things that are preventing the U.S. from moving forward the way that we need to.
Kim, that's huge. You mentioned implicit bias. our inability to separate our experiences and the things that we've seen that impact the way that we judge people and how we look at people and how we literally interact with people. People being could be our jumpers, could be coaches, could be the interactions that I have with a judge, or it could be a way that a judge may judge a particular competition. I think that's big and I think that's huge. And it moves, Kim, thank you so very much, moves me into the thought of what TK said about diversity being a power, diversity being something that we can leverage and being a strength. So, Kim, let me thank you for that. I know I'm going to come back to that, but I want to hear from TK in regards to your experience, TK, 25 plus years on your birthday. What barriers do you see that we have at IJRU?
Yeah, I'll start from a bit of personal level. I'm in Australia. The area I live in is, I would say, if I'm not afraid to say, it's a dominantly white Caucasian type of area. Looking back, I think I was trying to prove that I'm good enough. That looking back though, I maybe didn't realize it. And I think, our sport is great. It's accessible, inexpensive. It just need they need to just kids need a piece of rope to prove themselves in front of everyone. So we have the great opportunity here. And talking about a sport in Australia, our country is big, and reaching out to different corners of our country is quite difficult. However, with the technology nowadays, and again, we have a lot of, it's a piece of rope we need to send to the group. So, we have opportunities to grow our sport. And in IJRU level, as Carly mentioned, we have the gender policy. We're also starting the Athlete Council. And also, as I said before, to make the difference into power, we actually need to communicate our core values closely and carefully with all national governing bodies. We actually need to all leverage or utilize our core value that we truly believe in. We need to communicate with that core values with all the different groups, and that they need to buy in. Once we have the core value that everybody believes in, I think that's when the difference becomes the power and the inclusion starts. And we can bring all people in.
I like that, TK. I like that a lot. You gave us the Australian perspective. Is there an Asian perspective that you may also see some barriers in when it comes to IJRU? Some experiences you have? Curious.
Oh, yes and no. Asian countries in our sport, they are the powerhouse at the moment. So, when we start talking about the speed and like double dutch, we just have to worship them. So, that's what I said. Once we have a piece of rope and use some amazing things in front of everyone, they'll respect you. That's the power of sport and power of jump rope here.
Thank you for that. Collectively, you guys have shared. I'm hearing collectively from across the world. We're hearing access and funding. Thank you, Keo, for that. Just to be able to get through the competitions, the economic barriers, and hearing from TK. And it sounds like ultimately, there's some economic barriers. There's some education barriers. There are some leadership barriers, the domination of men in the sport. And even when I hear Janice talk and talk about being able to collaborate and provide different experiences for the jumpers, working cohesively, collectively together in our different regions so that at the very least, we can provide the inclusion necessary even in our states and cities where we're working together and showing a definite commitment to what Sean referred to as the core values. But as we look at those core values and work through that lens, I think it's important in every region that we consider that. But I'm really interested in hearing from Sean, from his leadership seat, when he looks at the organization perhaps he can shed some light on, and he's already shared with us a tremendous story at the beginning. But Sean, from your leadership seat, what barriers do you see for the organization that may be preventing the organization from growing?
Sure. Thank you for that, TK. I almost called you TK. Thanks for that, Adrian. My twin brother over there. We have a mind meld. Some barriers that I see for our sport are one of looking at ourselves as part of an overall sporting community. I think what often happens is we view our sport as this siloed thing, in that many things that happen in our sport are not what's happening in other places. So we feel that we're immune, right? We feel that we are immune from outside thoughts, or what's happening in the real world doesn't happen here. I think that mental barrier needs to come down, because now we place ourselves in the context of what's happening globally, and that all those things, anytime you have humans involved, all those things will show up within our organization and within our sport. So I think for us, I think there's a mental barrier that we have to say, no, we are a part of this global community, and we have to be mindful that all the things that we see happen in the world, they do show up in our sport. I think that's one barrier that we have, first and foremost. The second barrier I think we have, and I see it already happening, and that is looking towards the future and different generations. I think our sport has been in a preservation mode, not in a progressive mode. We've been more so thinking about how can we preserve versus what can we achieve, what's possible. And when you take that barrier away and you begin to explore what's possible, those barriers around inclusion and diversity have to come down. Not a matter of should they have to come down if we are trying to progress our sport moving forward. Globally, and with the vigor that we feel that everyone should be a part of what we have to offer. And the last thing I think is a barrier that we have, and I think we can really do, and Carly touched on it, many people touched on it, is that we have to be accountable towards it. I think what often happens is we look at diversity and inclusion as someone else's responsibility. As, what are they doing? The real question is, what am I doing? What am I personally doing, whether you're a coach, whether you're an athlete, whether you're the president of IJRU? What are you personally doing to advocate for equality? Are you not just a non-racist? Are you an anti-racist? Are you actively moving forward and doing the work needed to question your own biases, to question things that you may bring to the table that you may not even be aware of? I think those are things that are barriers that we have. But the good news about all those barriers, they can be overcome. They can be overcome through great dialogue such as this. That's just the start of the conversation. They can be overcome, and I'm confident that they will be.
Sean, well stated. I'm hearing, wow, we need to shatter some mentalities. Definitely this whole ideal of looking toward the future instead of trying to maintain what has been successful in the past. And I'll say this, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, progressive organizations are dealing with this conversation. As uncomfortable as it is, as unnerving as it is, there's a lot of light bulbs going off right now across the globe as we talk about race and the impact of what happened with Brother George Floyd, but more importantly, just overall, since March with Breonna Taylor, Kristen and Amy Cooper in New York, and so many other incidences where race was involved. It looks and feels like every organization, small, large, are saying, what can we do better in this space? I'll be quite frank. It comes down to looking at customer base. You know that you serve a diverse population in France, in South Africa, in Canada, in Australia, and Asia. We've got to be able to embrace, somebody said, yes, to celebrate the diversity, to take diversity, like we've seen in so many different, where people have weaponized racism. We need to weaponize diversity and become a stronger organization. And what happens is, all of a sudden, we become partners with one humanity. And people look to IJRU, and they say, I don't know about all the other organizations, but IJRU, they are progressive. Let's partner with them. Let's give them the platform. Let's allow them to speak because they've gotten it right. So I can't say enough about Sean. You said a whole lot, and you ended it powerfully by saying it is overcomable. And it requires some really tough conversations and how we look at each other and what biases, going back to what Kim said, what biases do we bring to the table, and being transparent, being vulnerable, especially as leaders. So as we move into that space, thank you, Sean, and everyone for sharing that perspective. Got a lot written down here, a lot of thoughts, and I promise to Sean right now in front of everybody across the world to get him some notes about what I'm hearing and some possible themes. But before we even get off into that, let's talk about solutions. Let's talk about, as we've talked about, these barriers, access and funding to competition. In South Africa, they're very specific because it's the domination of the African participation in a country that has more than 11 languages. It's economic barriers, and being, Carly, I'm gonna call it out. There needs to be some education about things you can and can't do at a competition, and how people. You talked about being touched, and look, that's uncomfortable conversation, but there's an education that needs to be happening. And if not an education, somebody needs to be comfortable enough to tell somebody else that something happened to me that was inappropriate. A lot of times the barrier can be, I'm not certain what that looks like when I say that my coach touched me inappropriately, and then what that consequence looks like. So IJRU could.
And yeah, I'm just sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say, I think
it's okay.
We need to have in place spaces that people can go to. Who do I talk to in this situation? Is there a way I can speak anonymously? A lot of people are afraid to speak about some of these things, right. Especially if it is a coach or someone in a position of power. We saw what happened in the United States with the Gymnastics Federation. Our organization, like Sean said, is not immune to some of these things, and we need to be forward thinking about how do we put in place, policies about harassment where someone knows where to go. Right. And I think the other potential, so there's definitely an educational component. I think a lot of times as well that we lean too heavily on minority groups to do the educating, right? So whether it's about gender equality, whether it's about racial equality, but I think everyone needs to take their own responsibility to educate themselves and educate their memberships. I shouldn't have to teach people why it's inappropriate to say certain things to me all the time. That's work that I don't mind doing, but it shouldn't just be on me and other women to do that. It should be on everyone to be forward thinking and to educate themselves around that. Other ways that we can remove barriers is things like, remove people's names from applications when they're applying to sit in leadership positions, so that people aren't accidentally or unconsciously putting people like themselves into leadership positions. So if you remove a name from an application, you don't know the gender. It's harder to maybe identify ethnicity, religion, things like that. And so then you're looking just at their qualifications, and that's where you're making the decision off of. And that can help remove some of those unconscious biases that people might not even know that they're carrying around with them. And I think I'll say one more thing, just in terms of celebrating diversity. When we have a diverse organization, we have different opinions, we have people asking different questions, and that leads to creative solutions, right? And so sometimes I think we kind of started off this conversation that some people are afraid or get their backs up when they think about diversity. Someone might have a different opinion of me, that's not good. I want to hear someone who has a different opinion than me, someone who thinks differently than me, someone who's had a different lived experience than me, because they're going to be able to ask a question that I haven't even thought of. And then that's going to help us get a solution as a sport that we may have never thought about if everyone in the room was coming from, a white middle class, background, right? We're just going to ask the same questions. We don't even know what the problems are, right? And so that's, I think, where diversity can become powerful. And now
no, it's fine. It's making sure at the table, Carly, if I'm hearing you right, that there is not only diversity at the table, but that diversity is celebrated and we invite it and we create the atmosphere that we want the diversity there and we want to hear. It's one thing to invite TK to the table, but if TK comes to the table, if Keo comes to the table, but they don't feel welcomed, which was a word that we used the other day, where is the sensation of, you don't really want me here. You're just checking the box. But when you want me here, you want to hear what I have to say, and I can see change take place. Am I saying the same thing you're saying?
You are, and you're saying it in fewer words. So great job.
You're fine.
That's why you're the trained professional.
Look, this is good. This is good conversation and dialogue. And I would add to that, Carly, and we've talked about this before, just some policies in place to ensure that people have a grounding and a fundamental understanding of the different levels of diversity and inclusion and what that means when we compete internationally. If we get a chance to compete internationally, types of behaviors that are acceptable and types of behaviors that are completely unacceptable and will turn into negative consequences. So thank you, Carly, for getting that off. I could see that I could see you fidgeting and you wanted to talk about it. It's fine. It's great. It's great. Let's continue to talk about solutions. Kim, some solutions. And I want to highlight something I found out about Kim. She's doing something unique, and I want her to talk about it. I'm going to put you on the spot, Kim. She does a very unique thing with new jumpers that come to her group to ensure that they understand the commitment that IJRU has to diversity and inclusion, and that she creates a family atmosphere that I think could be a practice that's instituted across the globe. Kim, do you mind sharing with us some solutions and also share with us the unique thing that you do with your group?
Well, for my group, for new jumpers to have them feel welcome and included, we do what's called the intro circle. So we come in, we have everybody to introduce themselves, how long they've been jumping, their age, some small notes about themselves. And then I also do sort of like a junior coaching following where the jumper can be shadowed by a more experienced jumper because we all practice at the same time. That way they don't feel overwhelmed, they don't feel unwelcome. So we just do what we can to make them feel welcome on their new days when they're coming to the team. As far as solutions, I think we talked about maybe doing some networking events, more so than just the event that is happening after the world competition. That way people can maybe get to know each other a little better so they can feel included. I think there's not enough of that. We talked about everybody not being a social butterfly. I'm one of them. So a lot of times I'm not going up and approaching people, introducing myself. And I spoke about implicit bias, people already having a thought about who you are or carrying a certain reputation based on things that have happened, historical things that have happened, and not really knowing exactly who the person is, but just kind of judging them based on what they've seen at the competition or events that have happened. So I think maybe trying to bring the coaches together so that we can get a better understanding of, who we are, who are we competing against, not just coming to the environment based on, I'm here to win, that kind of thing, but just, trying to get to know each other. That is one solution that I would like to see. We also touched on leadership, trying to figure out how to hold leadership accountable, and coaches not maybe understanding exactly what's going on and how things are functioning. I was one of them. I didn't really understand some of the IJRU roles versus the, as I would say, the local federation on how you are qualifying to go to Worlds or moving forward to some other. I didn't really understand the process. So I think maybe educating the coaches, making sure that everybody's on the same table, making sure everybody understands, and not just kind of having our own sidebar conversations and making decisions and just just totally not understanding what's exactly going on. So those are two things that I would really like to see.
Kim, thank you for that. I'm hearing the education piece, maybe a quarterly or twice a year, sitting down with coaches to ensure they understand. There's a lot of opportunity with that. Thank you for that, Kim. I definitely want to hear from Keo about solutions. You had a very specific situation in South Africa with being able to help people see that there's a lot more diversity possible in South Africa with jumping. What are your thoughts about solutions in that regard, Keo?
I think that national governing bodies can play a role in bringing diversity than what we can think. They can play a role of mentoring young athletes that come in. Some athletes are there not only to compete but to really grow and be part of the sport that will in future maybe make a living out of. So I believe that when it comes to competitions or even sending people out of their own countries to the world, in making sure that there's representation, national NGBs have got a part to play. And for the world to be able to see diversity, I think it starts with national governing bodies. And yeah, one of my barriers was also funding, and I believe we've got a great sport that we can really showcase everywhere. And a lot of clubs, a lot of countries do fundraising, and I believe that we can do that. We have a sport that is very cool to watch. That is very sharp on the eye, that we can perform and get money from just performing. A lot of people do that, and that is one of the solutions also or things that we can tap into to make it better when it comes to funding. But leadership, I strongly believe that NGBs have a very big role to play on that.
Thank you, Keo. I appreciate you. Jojo and TK, I'm gonna come to you guys next. Interested in your thoughts about solutions and even some other thoughts about diversity that you all may have. I'd like to hear from you, Jojo.
Hey, there is a lot of sound around me. So if Chike can speak, and I will change because I am at the airport now. So I will just switch the place.
TK?
I'll come in. I think there's different solutions to many solutions. Oops, sorry, my phone just died, flipped. I'm trying to charge my phone as well at the same time. Multitasking, boy. The different solutions I think exist, and one of the key solutions possibly is definitely education. I hope I don't sound too arrogant here, but I'm part of the education system here in Australia. When you teach children, we model first, and we have the scaffolding for the kids. Then they start learning, they start writing piece by themselves. So IJRU's job is possibly, firstly, we have to model what the solution looks like. That could be the gender policy we talked about, athletes charter we have developed, inclusion, diversity, those things. Then we need to support those NGBs and different groups. Then they become more independent, performing, embracing their diversity, inclusion, and then they become, again, a part of the educator to their own clubs, and the clubs become educated to their individuals. I think they're in top-down, bottom-up sort of solutions could happen here. And I'd love to hear from, Janice, who's an educator here. So, so that's my taking from this conversation.
Thank you, TK. Janice, let's hear from you on that. Solutions, education. Are you seeing that same thing as a possibility, Janice?
Yes,
along with
yes,
something?
I am. I wanted to emphasize the importance of communication. Like within the United States, there's so many different leagues and they're having so many different events, and yet we don't all know about them and we miss opportunities. So if there's some way to get that communication established so that it's in one location and everybody can see what the different possibilities are in terms of workshops and trainings and competitions that may be coming up. I think that's an important thing to have so that we can have that reaching out that I talked about before. Holding leadership accountable, I think that would go hand in hand with training or having avenues for our coaches to be trained. I think we talk about training our judges and talking about our boards, but as far as coaches, they need to have that same type of training, how to run their practices, how to talk to their athletes. I think that's an important aspect that needs to continue to happen. It happens now and then, kind of sporadically, but not enough. And at the same time, I think it's important that when we are coaching or when we're in a leadership role or when we see something that happens that is that unconscious bias and it's made you feel uncomfortable, to not be afraid to dismantle it as it happens. Sometimes you're like in shock at the time it happens by what somebody says or what's, and you're saying to yourself, did I really hear that? Did they really say that? But at the same time, you don't respond. Whether that's because you've been trained not to do that, or you don't feel that you have enough power to do that. And I think we should all embrace our power and say, you know, I don't agree with what you just said. You just made me feel uncomfortable. You made me feel uncomfortable for the people that you're talking about. So I think those types of communications, that type of networking about leadership and giving coaches the opportunity to have more training is important as far as what we're talking about right now.
Janice, you just dropped the load on us. I think you said a whole lot, TK. That was a great assist. Appreciate that, Janice. That was a mouthful. I think a lot of what you said is exactly what's going to happen at multiple levels, from senior leadership to the judges, to the jumpers, to the coaches, and how they manage their practices. I think that's fundamentally something that has to happen. And TK talked about that modeling. I mean, I think it funnels in the right direction. Jojo, let's hear from you. Are you at a spot where you can talk?
Yes, I think now is better. You can hear me?
Yes, we can. You look great.
Okay. So basically, in France, what is good is, like I said before, we work all together. It's like there is the French Federation, and we organize everything with all the different clubs, all the different coaches, and we have like sorry, we have all the clubs have to respect what the French Federation made as rules for everybody, and this is good because we don't have like this problem of behavior or the thing we said before about coaches. If one jumper have a problem with one coach, he have some people he can talk directly, anonym or not anonym, but there is like different spot for everybody to be allowed to be welcome and to be good in the sport. So also if I can talk about there is something Kyo say before. It's about how she can have everybody jumping together. In France, it was like in South Africa at the beginning. Jump rope was like a black sport, so only black people who was jumping and doing double dutch. And we try to make this sport famous in the school. So in the sport school, so we go on the school and we teach teacher how to do jump rope with the children. And now we have a league, a school league competition just by the school. And with this, we touch a lot of people. We touch everybody, every color. So it's why when we come on the world championship, we have all nationality with us. We have all gender. We have every jumpers with us, and we are all together. And one thing is specific in France. It's after our national competition, the top three are allowed to go on the world competition. Just the top three, not everybody, not people who can pay to go on the competition. Like this, we are sure we have the best jumper at the competition. And with this, for us, it's better because we have like just our best jumper who go on the competition. And after the national, all these jumper they work together. So we have like a camp just with this with jumper like this. We can have like a unity, a French team who come together to represent the country.
That's impressive. I got a question for you. You said the top three go to the international. Is that funded by the country, or I mean, if we're top three and that third team doesn't have the funding for it, how do they get there?
Can you repeat your question? Sorry.
Sure. If the third team or second team that's at the top three and they don't have the funding, who pays for them to go internationally to competition? How does that work?
Oh, if they don't have the funding, if they don't have the funding, the French Federation can help, the clubs can help, and then we have like a money with the club who can help. But if they don't have the money, for sure they will not come. So we can help, but we can't pay for everything. So if they can't make it, they will not come.
Got you. But there sounds like there is some help to help them get there, though. They're not without help.
I don't hear you because there is like some sound in the same time.
Oh no, it's no problem. It sounds like you guys do provide help, though.
Yes, for sure.
Yep. I think it goes. Thank you, JoJo. Appreciate you, man. I think it goes back to something that Keo said and some of the others about funding. And I've got that written down. I like the fact that the top three, no matter what, they at least have the help to get to the competition. And it sounded like there's even this thought or this effort around other clubs coming together to work together. I like that idea a lot. Nothing brings people together cohesively like working together. So if that's a volunteer effort to paint a house or to work on a community garden or have a group car wash, if we're all working together, I think there's just unity in that and being able to see people differently other than at a competition. I hope that makes sense. And I know we're limited on time, but I want to hear from Sean one more time. Sean, your thoughts? What are some, you've heard from the whole world here, what are some solutions that bubble to the top for you as the leader of the organization?
Well, I think everyone really hit it just right. That I think some solutions that we can work towards, really holding ourselves accountable, right, and building matrix within our own organization that we say, are we successful or not? There's an old expression: what gets measured gets accomplished. So if we're not measuring it or actively looking at it, it won't get accomplished. So I think one solution could be holding ourselves to some key diversity and inclusion matrix in data, the metrics and data points. I think those are some clear-cut solutions from a leadership perspective that we can begin to look at. And then also education, I think, is huge. Also, not just the IJRU, but also to our respective members, our NGBs. Deliberate education on all of these topics. Our sport has been, again, as I said before, we've kind of been in this isolated area for many years, thinking that we don't have these challenger issues. And it's clear as we're seeing that, no, these things exist and we really have to actively pursue them. Because if we don't manage it, it will manage us. That will happen. Additionally, I think there are also opportunities we have for greater inclusion, especially, of course, I think from a race ethnicity standpoint, but also from a physical disability and cognitive disabilities. We as a sport have said it, but not actively pursued ways to do that. And I think we do that through deliberate actions, such as having commissions that we can appoint to vet out the ideas, having our technical committees and technical Congress take up the challenge of saying, how can we include individuals who might be, hearing impaired? How do we include events for people who might have body parts that are no longer there? Being creative and think about some solutions for that. I've seen some instances of it, but again, it was not deliberate. And I think I think that is an action step, deliberate action, not passive action. I think that is a difference between organizations who are thriving and organizations who are just surviving. And I think our sport has been in a survival mode way too long. We need to be in a thriving mode. And to thrive, we have to be deliberate, take action, and move progressively.
Sean, thank you so very much for speaking on that. I like the ideal of thriving and what that means. And it sounds like these solutions from across the world are ideals on how we can thrive. Again, I want to lean in on this one. And I know people have been active on chat, that if we are not collectively as an organization, from Connecticut to France, Australia and Asia, all the way back to America and South Africa, that we have got to be having this conversation, and it's got to move from conversation into actionable steps. Things that look like policy change, things that look like unconscious and implicit bias training, being able to identify the things that have shaped you, things that you've been exposed to, television, education, how you were reared, and how those can impact how you treat jumpers, how you treat the parents of jumpers. And if you're a judge, how your perspective and lens could impact your judging, because how you see something that Sean referred to as conformity versus expression. We've got to be able to eliminate all of these barriers so that when people call on IJRU, they see an organization that's, I want to get this right, that's focused on the future and not trying to hold on to the past. There are some great things that you've done in the past, without question, and they should be celebrated. But in order to ignite the future and go after it in a meaningful way, got to aggressively get after conversations like this one and others. Sean, you had said something, sparked a thought in my head. And I'm not sure how much time we have left, Carly. I want to do a time check. How much time we have?
I mean, we don't have a hard end point, but I think we don't want to go too long. So just be mindful of that. Like, I think if we can go to probably another 15 minutes or so is probably good.
Oh, yeah. Not even that amount of time. Not even that amount.
Yeah. We won't cut you off.
Oh, yeah. I'm okay with the cutoff. I'm okay with that. Sean had said there's a difference between saying that I am not a racist versus being an anti-racist. Dr. Ibram Kendi wrote this amazing, he's wrote a couple of books actually, but he wrote this amazing book called How to Be an Anti-Racist. And in the book, he talks about action. He talks about it's not good enough to make the comment that I'm not racist, or in our conversation, we talked about being inclusive versus not being inclusive. But point blank, it's not enough anymore to say that, yeah, I'm not that. That's not enough anymore. People are looking for straight up action. What are you doing as a leader in this organization? And what is this organization doing to ensure that action is taking place? That we are moving past, oh yeah, we believe that we should do the right thing. Show it to me. Prove it to me. And how you behave towards jumpers, towards parents, how you behave at venues. So if there's a particular venue and it's at a particular facility, how are you interacting with the person that manages that venue? What are people saying about IJRU when you walk away? What is the conversation now? Are they saying, yeah, those kids were terrible. They were mocking people. The coach didn't correct them. the leader or are they saying otherwise? I work with children at our local church here, and I've always instructed them. And I've had several people at different establishments say, your kids really act differently than other kids. And that's because we spend time ensuring that the kids understand this is how you act in public. So I think there's some small tweaks that we can do to ensure that not just Sean and not just TK and the coaches, but even the children understand what it looks like when they travel abroad representing the organization. I hope that makes sense. So just wanted to put that in the atmosphere in regards to, we talked fundamentally about policy. We talked about the national governing board. But I think there's also something to be said about how we inspire and how we teach and how we come down to the jumpers to ensure that they understand, just like what Kim does, what it means to be an organization that's inclusive or moving to being anti-racist. Does that make sense to everybody? Do a thumbs up. Yeah, I see you. So that was my parting thought is for you all as a challenge. Think about your children and think about their parents. Are they hearing languaging from you that would suggest that you're having this conversation and this dialogue? Because I'm a parent. I have 4 children. And I can tell you that my wife and I are looking at every organization that we're a part of, and we want to know what they are doing about race and race relations and being inclusive. It is important. So my parting, I don't know, actionable thought or call to action is consider as a leader, as a coach, as a person that's on this call, what are you doing personally to ensure that you're embracing this conversation, you're challenging yourself, you're being vulnerable. Harley said it, and I almost fell out of my chair when she said it. You cannot hold people accountable for an education that you need to own. You need to do it yourself, and there's enough out there, enough books. You can go to YouTube. One of my favorites is Emmanuel Ocho, Uncomfortable Conversation with a Black Man. You should look that up. There's a couple of books out there. How to Be an Anti-Racist is a good one. White Fragility is there's enough out there. Podcasts. What are you doing to invest time and energy in becoming a better you for this organization when it comes to inclusion? With that, pump your thoughts into the chat. And if you've got a book, if you've seen a movie, if you've seen a podcast or an article, pump it into the chat. I'm sure that this group would take a look at that and perhaps can create a resource for all to take advantage of. I'm going to pass it to Carly or Sean, and I'm good.
Thank you. Please, guys, join me in thanking Mr. Adrian Taylor for a job well done. We thank you so very much for moderating our panel. We thank you so very much. We really do. Again, it's always good to have outside perspective from our organization. I think sometimes we get so close to something that it's tough for us to recognize some of our own issues. So I will always bring in outside perspectives. That way we can be cognizant of our own biases within our own sport. So again, thank you, Adrian, for a job well done. To all the panelists, again, thank you so very much. Of course, to Janice, who's been around the sport for 30 plus years. We thank you for your wisdom. We thank you for what you've shared with us. Again, thank you so very much. To Kim Bradshaw for your many years as both an athlete and a coach. We thank you so very much for your heartfelt words, and we appreciate the practices you are implementing. Thank you. Also to South Africa, Keo, thank you so very much for giving us a perspective, because it's not always how can we include people of color. Sometimes it's how can we include non-people of color into the situation. So thank you for sharing that. Of course, to Carly Simpson, Dr. Simpson. We thank you for your passion around gender and women equality, gender equality, period, and also from a policy perspective. So thank you very much. Of course, to Mr. the illustrious Jonathan Mahato, thank you so very much, and what the Europe and France are doing with the work of being inclusive and overcoming some of those barriers. So we thank you. And to the Executive Vice President of IJRU, Mr. Takashi Ogawa, I want to thank you personally for partnering with me in our effort to continue to move our sport forward. I'll say this publicly, and I always say it, that TK was instrumental. Like this merger would not have happened if TK would not have been such an avid partner in working with each other. He understood what the dynamics were, and as did I. But it takes two willing partners to work together. So I want to always thank TK for being that willing vessel to move our sport forward. So thank you again, TK, for your participation here today.
Thank you. And again, we call ourselves brothers in crime together, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right. And of course, to all the folks working on the back end, thank you so very much. Again, Mr. Nick Woodard, Carly Simpson, Svante, Andre Kasalico. Again, we thank you so very much for your great work on the back end for making this happen. To all those who participated in the call, who've been on this, who are watching on YouTube or streaming, for all those who put on the chat as well, I want to thank you so very much for participating in this very important discussion. Please note, this is just the start of the discussion. This is not a one and done thing. I do believe that our sport has the opportunity to grow. One thing I do want to say to all the leaders out there, whether you consider yourself a leader, whether you have a leadership by title as well, or if you're an informal leader, you know, within a team or a club, a captain of an athlete, whatever it may be, leadership, I want to make sure you all understand this message. It is okay to criticize yourself. It is okay for things to challenge you, because it's through the struggle, it's through challenges that you grow. If you're surrounded by people always telling you what is right, you need to run as fast as you can. You need people around you to tell you what they think is probably not right, probably what can be done better. Again, tactfully, of course, but I think that's what's important with this conversation today. It challenges us. That's not a bad thing. That's a gift. I'm excited to hear what it is what the perceptions may be, what the challenges may be, because through challenges there are opportunities. And so I want to thank all of you for giving us a perspective and helping us understand where we can be better as a sport. So again, thank you all so very much for your time, energy, and dedication. This will be posted online as well. This is just a start of conversation, and we will continue the dialogue. Until next time, we'll see you. Thanks so very much. All the best.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.